And if you play music, you are always performing for and on behalf of the community, not on behalf of yourself. Every music making musicians are fulfilling as a social responsibility, and you do it for and on behalf of the community.
You are listening to the Music and Peacebuilding Podcast, a professional development network at musicpeacebuilding.com, exploring intersections of peacebuilding, sacredness, community creativity, and imagination through research and story. Michael Checo and I sat down to interview Sowah Mensah. Sowah is one of the most respected music educators in the world music drumming curriculum. On this day, we were experiencing very bad audio quality over a shaky internet connection, so we were not able to use the recording for a podcast. However, the content is so rich, we are presenting it here in the form of a captioned video. This interview is rich because it approaches explanations about why studying West African music is a lifetime of discovery. And Sowah emphasizes that we need to leave our Eurocentric assumptions about music learning at the door, as we try to encounter music in a more authentic way. The repetition of repertoire and a timeline is at the heart of West African experience. We began by asking Sowah about his music learning.
So I was hoping that you could tell us a little bit how you first started learning the music that you play and teach today.
Well, it is, that's a difficult one to answer because we don't learn music like that. I have never taken a drum lesson in my life, but I've always played drums. But I did take piano lessons, I took violin lessons, I took flute lessons, master flute lessons, through college. And so I can tell you I learned those. But for our traditional music, it is an informal type of learning. You grow up in the music, you participate, and remember that people don't realize that traditionally Africans participate in music making at a very, very, very early age. And so all games that children play include song, movement, and some improvised instrumental backing. So kids are making music at a very, very early age. You start walking, you're already dancing, you're singing, and adults do not create games for children. All African games that they are children's games, they were created by kids, by African kids. So in my time, growing up, you were doing music all the time, every day. You play with your friends, you're singing, you're moving. Some of us are improvising drums. And then most activities that go on in the community, there's music that is part of it. And so as a kid, you're constantly watching adults playing. You're watching adults dancing. You're hearing adults singing. And rehearsals of groups is always done in the full view of the community. And anybody can go to any rehearsal. You don't have to be in the group to go watch the rehearsal. And so kids who are interested in, continuing playing, if there's a group in their neighborhood, they almost every day they show up at the rehearsal and sit and just watch. But the watching is not an audience type of watching. You're watching, you're tapping some of the rhythms on your thighs as the adults play. You're watching the techniques, what they're doing with their hands. By the time you are 5 years old. And for a lot of kids, by the time you are like 3, 4, you can play almost any time, hold the timeline for anybody to play on. So, and Michael, you know the importance of the timeline.
Sure, and as someone who has studied this music with you and others, I'm familiar with that concept of timeline. Can you explain a little bit about what timeline means in the context of your music?
Well, the timeline is the framework within which the music is organized. That's pretty much what it is, the framework within which all the music is organized. Whether it's the instruments or it's the singing or it's the dancing, you couldn't do it if you don't have a timeline. And all the music relates to timeline in such a way that until you figure out the relationship of the part you're playing to the timeline, you don't know the part yet. And you know what I mean by that. You can play with somebody, but when they stop playing, you get lost right away. Until you start to feel your relationship with the timeline, you don't know the part. You may know the part, you may be able to play it with somebody, you may even be able to play it on your own, even though it might be just a 2-note phrase. You won't be able to come in on your own when the timeline is playing. And so that is why the timeline, everything revolves around the timeline. Any music you hear, you want to know what the timeline is. Once you have the timeline, everything else makes sense. So that's what the timeline is.
I was just curious, when you were talking about the timeline, did you use that word timeline when you were playing music, or is that a word that you have started using as you've taught this music in the United States?
Oh, it's a word that earlier ethnomusicologists coined to describe that phenomenon, because they noticed that in almost all the music, there is a phrase that is played over and over and over again by an idiophone, a bell or a woodblock, or a clave. Occasionally, it may be played on a rattle. Occasionally, it may be played on a drum. If you have a drum ensemble that does not use bells and things, then the timeline part will be one of the drum parts. But usually, you have an idiophone, which is used in playing. And some of the early writers of the music referred to that phrase as a timeline. And that's why I use it. It's an English word. It's not in my language. We will say, the bell part. That's how you call it. Bell part. You got to listen to the bell part. You got to play with the bell. That's how musicians talk. You aren't listening to the bell. You're not playing, with the bell. It doesn't matter which language it is. They will use the word for bell to describe it.
Sowah spoke of the differences between Eurocentric and West African music making. He says that it would be crazy for a person in West African traditions to practice their part alone. Parts are always learned in community, so that parts are learned in relationship to other parts.
If you play in orchestra, you sing in choir, you play in band, you are supposed to learn your part and then come and play with everybody. You don't come to orchestra practice or band practice to learn your part, and everybody's learning their part at the time. That is very, very different from how we do music. You are not expected to practice your part alone, ever. Which means that the only time you make music is when you have all the other parts, which means everybody who plays present. We never rehearse alone, especially for drumming. Me, where I come from, if somebody sees you sitting somewhere with your drum in your house, or you go sit somewhere and you're practicing playing your drum alone, people will think you're crazy. Because you don't do that. You always practice with the group. Always. You learn the parts together. You practice. The only time you practice is when the whole group is there. There is no other time that you practice your part alone. And so that also tells you how people think that it's always about the group. And if you play music, you are always performing for and on behalf of the community, not on behalf of yourself. Every music making, the musicians are fulfilling as a social responsibility. And you do it for and on behalf of the community.
So, music educators have become increasingly sensitive to historical context of songs that they present in their classrooms. What would you want people to know that are implementing the world music drumming curriculum with their students to understand about the culture and the history of the music and songs that they find within the world music drumming curriculum?
Well, my experience is that a lot of music teachers are very resistant to teaching the music the way it is. And like I said, our music and Western music is apples and oranges. I write for orchestra. I have a lot of orchestra compositions. Some of them, when you hear them, you know that I'm writing, within the African music theoretical rules. I have compositions that, for chorus and, in some orchestra you hear them, you won't believe that I wrote them because they are as classical as you can think of. And like I'm saying, the way we learn our music is different. We don't usually use notation systems in learning them. We call it a slow absorption. You keep doing it and you get better at it. The goal and the motivation for doing music is very different from that here, especially in schools. Choir directors, orchestra conductors, and so on, band directors, they select all the way up to the professional level. Symphony orchestras around the country and around the Western world, they select music for a particular concert or a season. They learn them. When they finish the next season, they do an entirely new set of pieces. They don't repeat the last concert. The only music that usually find them ensembles play is like Christmas music and so on. But otherwise, the way Western music operates, you work on a set of pieces, you perform it. The next performer, you do a new set of pieces, and so on and so on. But we don't do our music like that. You play the same music, you play the same music forever. The question is, how well are you playing? Because if you play the same piece for 1 year, and you continue playing it for 2 years, you will sound much better at the end of the second year than the third year. And we believe that there's no limit that you can say, finally, I have played this piece to a level that I can't go beyond. We don't think like that. And because of that mentality, you don't think about the fact that, I'm playing this all the time, I'm tired of it. No, you can't be tired of it because you haven't played. Think about it. You're a kid. You're a young guy. You played for maybe 10 years, 15 years, in groups. But you have people who are 50 years old, who are 60 years old, and are still playing the music. You maybe play the same pieces, but when you hear the older guys play, you're hearing things that, you cannot get those sounds. Because basically, if I hit the drum 10,000 times and you hit the drum 100 times, just playing, just hitting it, one tone. If I do that 1,000 times and you do that 100 times, we will not sound the same. Because I will get a sound that you cannot get because you haven't hit it as many times as I have. So that is the mentality of our music. And also because traditionally, our musics are all part of something else, not just music. So that we don't concertize. We don't have music that people come to sit just to watch music. That is also not part of the culture. Like Christmas music here. It is always relevant and it always works. Every Christmas, people hear Deck the Halls, they hear Silent Night, they hear, all these, we wish you a Merry Christmas. People don't get tired of it. They want to hear it at Christmas time because the music is part of the Christmas itself. It's not separate. And therefore, can you imagine going through from Thanksgiving to the first of the new year without hearing Silent Night or Deck the Halls or any of those Christmas tunes anywhere? You don't hear it on radio. You don't hear it in the shops. You don't hear it on TV. You don't hear it anywhere from Thanksgiving to January. Think about that. It will feel so weird. You probably won't feel it is Christmas. Because what makes you feel that it's Christmas is carols, is decorated Christmas trees, is shopping for Christmas presents, and all the things that go into Christmas. Families coming together. That is what Christmas is. If you take any of these parts in it, Christmas is not complete. For us, all our music is like that. It's an integral part of everyday life. My point is that one of the things I experience is that during these workshops, it is very, very difficult to convince music teachers that they can teach this music the way Africans do it, and it will work. Some of you do. The few of you who do it, you are the ones who are able to play these pieces with your students. There are a lot of teachers, they take the workshops year after year after year after year, but they have a hard time putting it all together. The world music curriculum pieces, because it's written out, they try to use it that way. But those of you who play like my pieces and Josh's pieces, you don't use an invitation to play them. You learn them, you keep coming, you learn them, level 3 people, and you get better and better and better and better, and you keep adding. So that is the resistance that I see to teach the music within its notes. And also the fact, the point that I made, that music teachers want to be, okay, they came this year, learned this piece and that piece. Next year, they want to learn new pieces, so when they go back to their school, they teach the kids new pieces. They don't want to teach them the same old piece. Now, that is trying to do the music like you're doing American music. Africans don't do that. You have to know that. And Michael, I'm sure you know this. You do bobobo with your kids. And I'm sure every year you realize that you know it better and you're teaching it better. And if you continue playing it with your kids, they'll be playing it better and better and better. There are schools that have done residencies for 15 years in a row, 17 years in a row, 10 years in a row. Second graders are playing bobobo because over the years they hear it all the time. They want to know that they're hearing it. And so by the time they're down with first grade, they know the phrase. They've heard it so many times. You teach them, they already know the rhythm. They just have to get the part, the hand combination, and then they're going. So that is, I think, one of the major problems. Most teachers are very resistant. They want to teach the music like the way they teach American music or Western music, and it doesn't work like that.
So in our music classrooms, we obviously are expected to be teaching our students to become more musical. In what other ways, besides learning music, do you think the world music drumming curriculum is going to change and shape our students who participate in it?
It should, if the music teachers teach it within the norms and the traditions of the music in the curriculum. The world music curriculum is African music. It is arrangements within the style of African music. So it's not motivated by African music. It is not it's not suggested by African music. It's usually a question of how the teachers teach the music. They are not always willing to teach it the way they're learning it. They learn it, but they want to teach it the way they teach all the other music. And it never really works like that. And I know some of you teachers who do it the way you're learning it, and you're getting your kids playing it, but they're playing it well. They're playing it very well. So that is the problem that I see with what goes on in music.
Sowah used his experience in learning piano to compare Eurocentric notions of music learning with the learning of Ghanaian drumming.
I started taking piano lessons when I was 4 years old. Okay? In Ghana. When I was 4 years old. The first day I went, my mom took me to this piano teacher. I didn't touch the piano. He said, "Did you bring any books?" I said, "No." He gave my mom a list of piano books that we had to go by. We went and bought it. The second day we came, I thought I was going to play the instrument. I came in with my books. We took the books, opened one of them, said, "Do you know what these lines are?" I was 4 years old, living in Ghana. How would I know what those lines are? I'd seen them before, but, I had to learn the lines and spaces. I had to learn the note values, quarter note, half note, and all those things. I had to learn to clap simple rhythms. It was my third piano lesson that I played the instrument. Third one. Now, by this time I was already playing drums. I think I was 4 years old. I was playing. I had been playing drums, for 2.5 years or something like that. But I had to learn it that way. And once I could read, because all the music was written down. So if you didn't read that music, you're not going to be able to play it. So I had to get those tools, and then I had to read. And I always had to practice before I go for my lesson. Because you're not going to go to your lesson and practice what your teacher asked you to do. You should practice it at home. Know it and come. If you come and you're able to play it, he moves on to the next thing, or teaches you more of what it is. But we don't do our music like that.
What one piece of advice would you give to a teacher who walks into a world music drumming workshop to really feel empowered to walk out and teach this music to their students in a powerful way?
My advice is, when they come to world music drumming the first time, they have to know that they are probably at the kindergarten level, or maybe even preschool, depending on their own musical experiences before they came. And therefore, they need to understand that there is only so much they can get and take with them at the end of the week. It's only 1 week. And, I tell participants all the time, look, level 1, if the stuff that I do with you, and usually level 1, I teach them the songs, we do CCC, Slaviye, and Bawa, depending on where it is. And I teach them a little bit the tuba bobble phrases. And I said, don't feel like because you've come to a week-long workshop, you should be able to go and teach all the things that you studied, because you can. The chances are that you will not be able to teach them. You have to be able to be comfortable. You have to know them well before you can teach them. And so, whatever you can get out, if it is one song that you can learn, like especially like the things that I do, if let's say you can do one Bobo song with your students, or CCC, if that's all you can take, go teach your kids. You also have to realize that since you're a beginner, you should not plan to come take one workshop and go. Because most workshops that music teachers take, which is about the music that they've studied and they teach, they get things that they can take and go teach it all. But you shouldn't expect that in world music room, because you are a beginner in that music. And therefore, your plan should include coming back. If you really want to continue teaching the music, you have to keep coming back and keep coming back. So you started from preschool or kindergarten, and if you come a few years, you'll be at maybe second grade. You come a few more years, and so there are people who have come for 10 years, they are probably at the grade of a fifth grader in this music. They have to admit that it's something new they're learning. Their Western music training is not going to help them do this music. And a lot of teachers don't understand that. They feel like the Western music training should make any other music easy for them to do. And when they come and it's not happening, they get frustrated. Okay, so that is one. Two, take only what you can control from the workshop. I tell them, look, if all you can do with your kids, that's the only phrase you can play. A class of 30, teach them that phrase. They will play, they will go home and play it on the dining tables, they will play it in their classrooms, they will play and play. The kids will not be bored with it. The teachers get bored with it. So, well, I can teach them only one phrase and that's it. Yes, that is it. That's what you can handle. The next year, you can learn another phrase, be able to control it and teach it. And so, those are the things that being prepared. First, to know that if you're going to do world music drumming, it's not a 1 year or you do levels 1, 2, 3 and you've graduated. No, you got to keep doing it, because I tell teachers that, look, think about how long you've done Western music all your life. Before you started walking, you heard the music on the radio, you heard it in church. If your family goes to church, you hear it in movies, you start school, you sing in choir, you learn in recorder, you play in orchestra band. I mean, you've done this music for all your life until you decide to do it in college. So anybody who goes to college to do music in Westerner, they have done a lot of music before they get to college to be music majors. And then you continue studying this music in college. You go to concerts all through your life. It doesn't matter whether it's school concerts or professional concerts. The music is all around you. And so by the time you get your music degree and you go to teach, the distance between you and your students is like night and day. You're so far ahead of those things. And so I tell them, if you want to do this music, then you have to put yourself in a position where you widen the gap between you and your students, because then you'll teach it better, as good as the music.
We encourage you to join workshops through World Music Drumming, located at worldmusicdrumming.com. This is the Music and Peacebuilding podcast, hosted by Kevin Shorner Johnson. At Elizabethtown College, we host a Master of Music Education with an emphasis in peacebuilding. Thinking deeply, we reclaim space for connection and care. Join us at musicpeacebuilding.com.